Last December, we lost someone very close to us. And that, my friends, was Adobe Flash. Now, I know that we've all moved to HTML5, and I was originally going to do a video where I looked over some of my favorite Flash games because I thought that, might make an easy video. But when I was doing research on some of the games I used to play in my free time, I stumbled across something. And that was a little game that everyone used to play. Line Rider. While researching Line Rider, I found an entire rabbit hole, and it turns out that there's a lot more to the history of Line Rider than one might think. And since somebody told me I was really, really good at making boring things sound interesting, I think we should cover it. So sit back, relax, grab a little bit of popcorn, about 10-15 minutes worth, and let me tell you the story of Line Rider. Now, Line Rider wasn't the viral sensation that everybody thought it was. It was actually an overnight viral sensation, because the night before, a young man by the name of Bozjan Kadez, I hope I pronounced that right, created Line Rider for his animation class. And he uploaded it to DeviantArt, hit the hay, and then the next morning he woke up and found that Line Rider had absolutely exploded. Now, the Line Rider is the one with the red, green, and blue lines. But surprisingly, the first version of Line Rider didn't have that. It was actually just the blue line and no eraser. With the overwhelming success of Line Rider, Bozjan decided to make a second version of the game. Thing is, life comes at you fast. So, between a broken motherboard, an ear infection, and some other stuff, Bozjan didn't get the game out as quickly as he wanted it to. And about 2 months later, after the first version of Line Rider, that version did come out. Thing is, a game company showed up and decided to buy the rights to Line Rider. So let's bring in InXile. So the name InXile Entertainment might sound familiar to you, and if it does, you've probably played Wasteland 1, 2, and 3, or you might have played one of the Bard's Tale games. They bought the rights to Line Rider in 2006, and with that, they made a website for the second beta, and they started taking down imposter copies of the game. At the same time this was happening, a graphic designer by the name of TechDog had broken his leg. Why is that important, you may ask? I'm getting to it. Thing is, he's stuck at his computer with nothing to do. So he eventually found Line Rider, and using his abilities as a graphic designer, he started creating art pieces in Line Rider. This allowed him to rise to the top of the community, where he started a forum called I Ride the Lines. And in this forum, he brought people who played Line Rider and knew more of the technical aspects to it together. InXile saw this and invited him on to work on a secret Line Rider project they had been making. And that game eventually became known as Line Rider 2 Unbound.
Woo! Woo! Woo!
So what is the point of turning something like Line Rider into a console game? Was it to cash in on the popularity of Line Rider, or was it to make an actual game based off the concept of Line Rider? Regardless, Line Rider 2 is a lot of things, but overall it's actually surprisingly okay. I actually own 2 copies of Line Rider Unbound, and this was kind of the whole reason I wanted to make this video, aside from the death of Flash. Line Rider 2 was released on the DS, the PC, and the Wii of all things. And I own the DS and the PC versions of Line Rider. And yeah, it's just Line Rider, but with new features. We've got the trampoline line, the trapdoor line, and the trick trigger. which allows the character known as Bosch to go off a ramp and do a trick. Now you're probably asking yourself, Cole, why is this man named Bosch? Is that something InXile made up? What Cole is about to say is the word no, which is entirely wrong, so let me correct him real quick. The name Bosch actually comes from InXile founder Brian Fargo, who proposed the name after nobody could pronounce Bosdian's name, so they decided to give his nickname, Bosch, to the Line Rider. Line Rider 2 was kind of just confirming his name, and now in the community, everybody just calls him Bosch. So what else does Line Rider 2 have aside from being a Line Rider game you have to pay for? Well, it's got a story mode and a surprisingly good soundtrack for a game about sledding on lines. And this is also where TechDog comes back into the story, because since this was the secret project that they had TechDog work on, he did promotional material for Line Rider 2 using its graphical abilities to add like mountainous scenery in the background, as well as making Bosch do tricks, and they also had him design all 40 of the story mode levels. And now you're probably asking yourself, Cole, there's a story mode in a Line Rider game? Do you care to elaborate? Yeah? I mean, I could. It's a puzzle game. But I think it would be more interesting to show you the first cutscene of Line Rider 2 Unbound. So take a look. So what'd you think of that? I mean, it's as simple gets, right? Good guy, love interest, bad guy. I mean, you can't get more gamey than that either. Now here's the kicker. This is the voice cast for the game. Why are they here? Why do we have the voice of SpongeBob and Spyro, Timmy Turner, and Yosemite Sam in a game about sledding on lines? It blows my mind. Why are they here? Why are they in this game? Of all things. I mean, you know, they're in a lot of stuff, but still. You wanna know something else funny about this? For a game that has a lot of really mixed reviews in like the Line Rider community, it's actually pretty freaking fun. So after doing Line Rider Unbound 2, InXile started doing a lot of other stuff with the Line Rider IP, which included making a version for like Microsoft's answer to Flash, which is called Microsoft Silverlight, as well as making a third beta of the game, which had all of the lines from Line Rider 2 in it. And then they ported the game to iPhone. Now I can't show you any footage of the iPhone game because it's not supported anymore because nobody touches like apps from 2006, which sucks because the World at War port of COD Zombies is actually really good, and I can't play it. So, you know, you win some, you lose some.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome...
So because of the fact that nobody really liked what InXile did, they kind of just dropped Line Rider altogether and stopped working on it. That, on top of the fact that TechDog started going his own way and didn't really spend much time on the forums that he created, everybody kind of moved somewhere else and became more close-knit. And like most things on the web, Line Rider's community all but perished. That was until 2014. Now, things just start going crazy here for the Line Rider community, because in 2014, an 18-hour live stream was uploaded where a bunch of people just reminisced and looked at tracks that were being created and were created during Line Rider's height. This brought the community back from the dead, and new versions of Line Rider started coming out, including timers for music, because people timing Line Rider tracks to music became really popular. A bunch of those tracks actually went viral on YouTube, bringing Line Rider closer into the mainstream. So with Line Rider now in the mainstream popularity, doesn't come without a little controversy. And no, it's not the kind of controversy you're thinking about. It's actually pretty well justified and worth talking about. There's a Line Rider user by the name of Doodle Chaos, and he's known for making music sync tracks, which we talked about a little bit earlier. Thing is, some other guy who made a Line Rider clone called Line Driver used Doodle Chaos's video on YouTube as an ad. And just, let it play. And everybody was thinking that it was from Line Driver, not Line Rider. And that drove a big stake through the Line Rider community's heart. So if you went onto the Reddit during that time, which was when I started working on the video, which we'll get to in a minute, there's just a bunch of pinned comments that are like, you need to report the guy that made Line Driver, get Doodle Chaos's video back. No, they're driving people away from Line Rider. And they're right. They are. And it was kind of bullshit. But it's weird to see an entire niche community of people come towards this greater cause to basically take down somebody who had wrongfully taken a video. And it's really, really cool to see, because you don't see that very often. Speaking of other versions of Line Rider, currently there are two different versions of Line Rider that the community uses, and that is Line Rider JavaScript and Line Rider Advanced. Both of them have their own pros and cons, but Line Rider Advanced is used for the more technical aspect of Line Rider, whereas Line Rider JavaScript is actually used for the more artistic section of Line Rider, which you'll see in your viral videos and your music sync tracks and stuff like that. This, however, has split the community right down the middle, because we now have two different groups of Line Rider users who have their preferred version of Line Rider. We have the artists who use the JavaScript version of Line Rider, and their whole purpose is to make a more entertaining and artistic Line Rider track to show the masses. Then we have the technics of Line Rider, the people who want to push Line Rider to its limits and really mess with the physics and the lines and try to make Bosch do as many crazy things that they could possibly do, because there's a lot to the technical aspect of Line Rider. They've got stuff called gravity wells, they have manualing, grinding, they have all sorts of crazy stuff, and apparently there's 10 points on Bosch where you can have him interact with a line and it does something different every time. So I don't know a whole lot about the technical aspect of Line Rider. So if anything, I would highly recommend watching this video that I'm going to put in the top corner by Line Rider Review, otherwise known as Rabid Squirrel. He's really big in the Line Rider community, and he was highly recommended to me by the current developer of Line Rider. Here's the thing. I found out that being the developer of Line Rider is actually a title that is passed down from generation to generation. Because when I originally wanted to make this video, it was about Line Rider 2. So I wanted to contact the developer of Line Rider to see if they had any involvement in the game. Assuming it was Bastian, I messaged them on Reddit, because I used it at the time. It was actually another Line Rider user by the name of Conundrum, which has made a lot of really popular Line Rider videos on YouTube. he got the title of being the Line Rider developer back in 2016, and he's had it ever since. So I didn't know that, and I think it's really cool that they're just like, you are now the developer of Line Rider. And they like hand him the pen to have him draw the lines. I don't know. But since the video was originally going to be about Line Rider 2, and then I dug up this whole rabbit hole, if I ever get in touch with anybody from InXile or somebody who had worked really, really close on Line Rider 2, I will make a follow-up video to talk to you about the development of Line Rider 2, because I find the game to be like this weird relic of the past. And when I got the PC version, it took me forever to find it because nobody had it. And then when I did find a copy, I wasn't able to launch it because I had to sign into some service that didn't exist anymore. So then I had to get past that, and it's a whole ordeal. It is, I'm telling you, it's like I dug up a fossil, and then I opened it up, and I just saw Tom Kenny sing like woohoo and yaha, and I was like, what the hell did I stumble across? Because I never played the story mode on the DS. I wanted to, and plus, I mean, I wanted the high quality FMV footage for this video, so I ended up downloading it on PC. But if I ever get in touch with somebody from InXile, I will make a follow-up video because I want to talk more about Line Rider 2 because I find it so weird. And that kind of brings us to the end of it. Line Rider is actually really cool with its like elaborate history and group of people who have come together to make technically movable art. If you do want to play Line Rider, you still can. It's on linerider.com. And, you know, as long as somebody's drawing a line, there's going to be a little man on a sled trying to ride it. Thank you for getting to the end of this video. Seriously, I appreciate it. Please, if you haven't yet, I would adore it if you subscribed and you liked the video and you shared it with your friends. Because every time you do one of those things, it makes me big and strong and it lets me grow. So, you know, aside from that, we're going to try doing this weekly thing. We'll see what happens. I've got, you know, I had to move things around, and I hope it all turns out. Stick around, because we're going to be going strong.